So John, welcome to Optimism Conference.
Thank you.
When did we meet first time? It was about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So you came to my house in Atherton in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we came there 5 years ago with my co-founder Logan.
Yeah.
And well before many people knew about Lyft.
Right. So now we have a Japanese audience.
Yeah.
And as you know, we talk about this, but we don't have rideshare business in Japan. It's not allowed. So not so many people are maybe not knowledge about Lyft because you don't have Lyft yet in Japan. So can you explain what Lyft is doing right now and how big it is and so forth?
Yeah, sure. So Lyft is a transportation platform, the fastest growing in the United States. And we provide all different forms of transportation. The goal is to improve people's lives with the world's best transportation to replace car ownership. So just like a 16-year-old got keys when they were in the United States, got keys to a car right when they turned 16 so they could drive. Now more and more people are turning to Lyft. They can get access to rideshare, they can get access to bikes, scooters, and they could find transit.
Right. So when we met 5 years ago, initially, let's start from how you started, from the Zimmer ride. So you and Logan are from the hospitality background, and what was the vision of your first company?
Yeah, so my personal background, I went to school for hospitality at Cornell University, and I took a city planning course my senior year, and I saw how the way we designed our cities was so important to people's well-being, local economics, economic mobility, and that we had unfortunately built many of our cities for cars and not for people, especially in the United States. Because many of the cities are so new, it was after car ownership was high, we built roads, we built parking lots. But in the US, Americans only use their car 4% of the time. 96% of the time the car is parked. And so we saw a massive opportunity. Just like hotels look at their occupancy, we thought that there was a major opportunity to increase the use or utilization of the car and provide people with what they really want, transportation freedom, not the burden of owning a car. And so the first business we started together was called Zimride. And it was long-distance carpooling. So when I was coming back from college, I could sell a seat in my car for $20 to someone else. And then about 7 years ago, we launched Lyft.
Right. And just for the audience, Rakuten invested into Lyft, and I became the board member of Lyft. And we have been working together. We are one of the largest shareholders of the Lyft, so we have been supporting Lyft for the last 5 years. But when we met first, you talked about, initially, so this is just alternative to limousine or taxi, but you talked about the transformation of the mobility. And we're not talking about just replacing taxi, but the mobility in general will be transformed. And what is the situation in the United States and Lyft, particularly speaking about Lyft? It's not. We're not just talking about rideshare, but we're talking about new things, right?
Yeah. So the average American household spends more money on their car than anything except the house, and they spend $9,000 to $10,000 every year owning and operating that car. And we said, if for something that you use so little, that doesn't make much sense.
Right.
And so really what we're trying to do is find all the ways that you want to get from point A to B, and then help you do that more seamlessly at a lower cost and more enjoyably. And so today, in the United States, if you go on the Lyft app, you can access transit schedules, you can unlock a bike or a scooter, you can get rides shared with other people, so they're lower cost. You can get a private ride, you can get a luxury ride. And so what we want people to realize is that Lyft is that full transportation service, not just singularly rideshare.
Well, probably we should not talk about too much about the figures, but since we became the partner or shareholder of the Lyft, you guys have gained significant share for the mobility services in the United States. And definitely one of the biggest driver was a very unique culture of Lyft, which is very different from your competitor, I suppose. Can you explain about the culture of Lyft and how different it is?
Yeah, so we have 3 values: be yourself, uplift others, and make it happen. And it's really simple. I think oftentimes in culture, in society, and in business, people forget the basics. They can put them on a poster with a value, but they don't actually live those values. And so we've been very intentional about creating a work environment where people can feel comfortable saying their opinions, being themselves, and taking care of each other. It's an important thing that we are in the service business. You know, we have millions of drivers who use the platform, tens of millions of passengers who use the platform. It is a people business. And so I think oftentimes businesses and technology don't kind of bring that hospitality into how they work. But for us, the people are core, whether it's our team members internally, whether it's our drivers or passengers. And that very simple idea of taking care of the people who allow you to have your business has been in contrast with our competition. But to me, it's just a very obvious first principle.
Yeah. Of course, I took a Lyft ride in the US, but just to compare, sometimes I take your competitor's service. And so whenever I take a ride, I always ask, which one do you like, Lyft or company you?
You can say it. You can say it.
Yeah, anyhow. And they always say Lyft is the better. And Lyft always consider more about the drivers than your competitor. And I am very, very, impressed by your hospitality to the drivers, of course, to and the customers as well. But I think that's the service model, service culture is way superior than your competition, I think. Yeah. And now, but let's talk about the diversity of the mobility/transportation. You guys started to do, the scooter shares, and now, of course, challenging autonomous driving. How is the future of the mobility is going to look like? Let's start from the U.S. cities, because it may be a little bit different from city to city, right?
Yeah, so if we look at a U.S. city in 100 years, our belief is that people will not own cars, period. In fact, it might be in certain cities illegal to, and then separately, it may be illegal to drive a car because of autonomous vehicles. And so then what we have to think about is, what is the right infrastructure that we need to support this? And what are the different types of ways people will get around? For me, I think street design becomes very, very important. We have designed streets and parking lots with the idea that everyone owns a car. But in the future, when I don't believe that will be true, that you don't need all that space. And so you can have more efficient roads, you can have less parking or no parking, you can make roads only for pedestrians, you can make roads only for cars, you can make roads only for bikes and scooters, and then obviously separate spaces for transit. So I actually think there's a big city planning moment and opportunity now to get ahead of what's coming. From a customer perspective, it'll be less stressful, it will cost less money, and you won't have the burdens of car ownership. And so you'll go to the Lyft app, you'll let us know where you're going, and then we'll offer you a choice. And Lyft will be the best place to find all of your transportation modes and complete a transaction frictionlessly. So if you want to rent a scooter, if you want to take a bus and then get a bike at the end, or if you want a private ride, it'll all be through Lyft. And autonomous is just one progression on that future.
Right. So city is going to be very, very different in the future. And I heard that right now, like 30% of the land of Los Angeles City is a parking space. And those parking spaces will be unnecessary in the future, right? And then you can use it in better ways. And so you are closely working with the cities and local government right now?
Yeah, so we hired former Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox. He used to work for President Obama, running transportation for the United States, and he now is the head of policy at Lyft. And we have many public-private partnerships, particularly in our transit part of our business, as well as in our bike part of the business, where, for example, in New York City, if you've ever been to New York City, there is a blue-colored bike program called City Bike. And it is a partnership now that we bought the company, so it's a partnership between Lyft and the New York City Department of Transportation. And Anthony Fox, both a former Secretary of Transportation and a former mayor, is helping us, along with those bike teams, build further partnerships.
And for the Japanese people, I think they have a little bit of anxiety, or they're a little bit worried about the safetiness of rideshare, and I think that is a kind of talking point of the taxi unions.
Yes.
That rideshare is dangerous. It's what we call shirotaku, white taxi without license. But can you counter argue about this? I think that's one of the most important argument for today's audience, right?
Yeah. So I would absolutely argue that ride sharing has improved safety beyond what taxis have been able to do historically. That is one of the fundamental reasons that we started the business. Many people need late night, they've had drinks, and they've had too many drinks and they need a safe ride home. But also if you think about getting into a taxi, whether you're here in Yokohama, in Tokyo, or New York City, you are anonymous. And so when you step into that vehicle, nobody knows that, if you have an account or kind of what that interaction is with the driver is completely anonymous, and that to us is something that we can make much more safe. So with Lyft, you have profiles, you can leave ratings before and after the ride. We do criminal background checks, we do driving record checks, we have higher insurance limits for the most part than what taxis provide. So if anything, I would argue we've drastically moved the ball forward on safety, improved it with technology, and we have more that we can do beyond that. But yes, I believe that is just a talking point and not a fact.
Well, I strongly believe Japanese people or Japanese community in general has that kind of a misperception about sharing economy in general, not only limited to rideshare, because the government has been very, very protective, or sometimes overprotective, but at the same time very, very bureaucratic. Because the fact that a taxi driver has a license doesn't mean they are safe. And I see so many traffic accidents, but using technology, the power rating by riders will give, overall, statistically speaking, more safety, in my personal opinion, than the medal, right? That's what I think. But how big is this overall mobility transformation in terms of the macroeconomy? How much do you think this can drive the economic growth?
It's large. If you look back, again, I'm more familiar with U.S. history, but I imagine for every country, if you look back at society, transportation has been a fundamental part of any economic revolution or any economic change. So in the United States, you have the Industrial Revolution. You had railroads. Prior to that, you had canals. And then obviously highways and cars that create growth opportunities. And when countries embrace that or plan for that, get ahead of that, it can create a very large opportunity. Reducing friction of getting goods or people from point A to point B can drive local economic activity. And so this is coming, and this is, I think, on the responsibility of both the companies and the governments to create the right policies, to create the right infrastructure, to make sure that the system is developed in a fair way, in an equitable way, and in a safe way. And that's what I'm really excited for, is that I believe that we are just in the early stages of what is going to be a fundamental economic shift and a fundamental change to how we live in our cities.
Right. And in Japan, we have a very strong fundamental issue, which is the aging population, right? And every day in the news, we see all these senior drivers making, car accidents, unfortunately, and sometimes we have a very severe consequences. So I think in Japan, we need to have something new, including ride sharing, because there aren't so many taxi drivers. So I think maybe together we can convince the Japanese government to become more open about it. So what do you want to do next? What is your vision of Lyft for the future?
Yeah, like I said, I think we're maybe 1% of what we want to create in terms of impact. We do millions of rides every week, but we haven't done enough yet to have people trade their car ownership in a massive amount for just Lyft. And so you'll see more from us on bringing together all those different modes, eventually getting to autonomous, and making it a bad financial and a bad experiential decision to own a car. And that's a multi-decade vision, and so we're very excited about that.
Okay. And I also want to talk a little bit about autonomous, because everybody is very, very interested in this topic, especially Japanese, because we have Toyota, we have Nissan, we have Mazda, we have Honda. The main industry of Japan is automobile. So what is going to happen to autonomous driving? Some people say it is going to take place in 2 years, or maybe it is going to take more than 10 years. What is your perspective about autonomous driving, and what is your strategy of Lyft?
It'll probably be between 2 and 10 years. That's my perspective. But I think no one has a crystal ball exactly when it will happen in the mainstream. But what we can say is that you can bring autonomous vehicles to the market on a ride-sharing platform like Lyft before you sell those vehicles to the public. And the reason why is because the Lyft platform doesn't need an autonomous vehicle to do 100% of our trips. But if you buy an autonomous vehicle, you expect it to do 100% of all your transportation needs. But with Lyft, we can limit what that autonomous vehicle does. So maybe it only goes under 35 miles an hour. Maybe it only drives within certain boundaries of a city. Maybe it doesn't go in bridges and tunnels. You do things that simplify the engineering challenge, and then you can bring autonomous vehicles to market faster. And because Lyft has drivers that can drive for all the trips that an autonomous vehicle can't do, because we have other modes of transportation, we are likely to be one of the first to bring it to market at scale. We've already partnered with multiple partners, Waymo, to bring these to market. Aptiv, I believe we've done 50,000 rides in Las Vegas in an autonomous vehicle with a safety driver.
Wow.
So it's happening, and it will I think it won't be all of a sudden. It'll be gradual to the point of becoming the majority over the next decade.
So, but eventually, as you mentioned, the people will not stop owning a automobile, but in the future, they will probably just use autonomous driving service. Right?
Correct. Yeah, that's what I believe.
That's like a scientific fiction.
Yeah, I have 2 young daughters,
right,
and I don't believe they will ever need to drive.
Right. For Rakuten, as you know, we are getting into Rakuten mobile 4G/5G services, and we believe to kind of as a backup, 5G remote distance driving center can be a very, very interesting option in case the autonomous driving somehow doesn't work. Maybe you have a heavy rain, or you have some car accident. The remote driver can take over the autonomous driving from the distant places. Do you have any opinion about this idea?
Yeah, I think that is likely a safety feature that will become more and more popular. I think 5G is a critical component of making that possible. I like when autonomous technology, the way you mentioned it, is there to protect someone in case something happens. If someone was to fall asleep or lose control, or if the autonomous technology was sure they're going to make the wrong decision. I think kind of like this exists, assisted driving exists in various forms, and I think it will get better and better. I think what I don't necessarily agree with is something like autopilot with Tesla, where it takes over more of the experience, because I think the better that technology gets, the more dangerous it is, because you rely on it more. You take your hands off the wheel and you look away. So I think, companies should be careful to have assisted driving, that helps protect in an emergency, and then fully autonomous for specific trips.
I see. Okay. So unfortunately, we run out of time. So would you give your kind of last message to today's audience and the people watching online?
Sure. I guess my last message to anyone in business and entrepreneurship is to really just have both your company's mission, which is ours is improve people's lives with the world's best transportation, and then your personal mission, which for me is reconnecting people and communities, and just do the work that you love, do the work that gives you joy, and that's what you will be best at. And against many difficult odds for us, because we were grounded in those values and those missions, and because we had great advisors and investors like Mickey, we were able to get through it all.
Let me summarize in Japanese. Yeah. 本日はどうもありがとうございました。今日のセッションはですね、極めた重要なセッションでございまして、もう世界中でいわゆるライドシェアというのは、もう一般的に使われているわけですよね。アプリケーションでドライバーを呼んでそれに乗って、そしてその後自動的に課金されると。でドライバーは必ずしもフルの運転手じゃなくてもよくて、例えば芸術家とか、あるいは主婦の人がすごくしっかりとしたレーティングのもとにですね、シェアリングエコノミーでドライビングする、これがいわゆるモビリティ革命を起こして、それが将来的には自動運転というものになっていくだろうと。よって自動車を保有するという概念が将来的にはなくなってですね、自動車をサービスとして使う、トランスポーテーションをサービスとして使う、それによって都市設計も大きく変わるし、それから環境への大きな貢献もできると、こういうふうに世界は動いているわけですけれども、残念ながら日本ではですね、さまざまな政治的な動きもありまして、そういうことが起こってこないと。で海外に行って実際に Uber とか Lyft を使った人はですね、これはやっぱりこういうふうになるべきだ、あまりの便利さに驚くわけですけれども、経験したこと人はなかなかわからない。ただ世の中はもうそのように動いているということでございますので、楽天グループとしてもですね、このようなより安全で便利で柔軟性の高い移動サービスをですね提供していくということが日本の発展にとって極めて重要だと思っておりますので、我々が作っております 5G のネットワークも含めてですね、この辺にチャレンジしていきたいと思います。I said that Ridesharing is extremely critical for the future of Japan, and Rakuten wanted to do our best combining our 5G initiatives. Thank you, John. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.